Tonight at 10, Theresa May says she intends to serve a full term as Prime Minister and is getting on with the job. Speaking after a reshuffle of her cabinet, she dismissed claims she's now a caretaker leader.
I said during the election campaign that if re-elected I would intend to serve a full term. But what I'm doing now is actually getting on with the immediate job.
But the Conservative Chancellor she sacked says she's living on borrowed time.
Theresa May is a dead woman walking. It's just how long she's going to remain on death row.
The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn says he's ready any time to fight another election as talks continue between the Conservatives and the Democratic Unionists. Also tonight, police release new images of the Manchester Arena bomber and say they're now sure he made the device alone. President Macron looks set to win an overwhelming majority for his new party in France's parliamentary elections. And England's footballers win the World Cup at under-20 level. Good evening. Theresa May says she intends to serve a full term as Prime Minister and is getting on with the job. She was speaking tonight after reshuffling her cabinet and said what the public wanted to see was government providing certainty and stability. But she's faced more criticism today, with the former Chancellor George Osborne saying the election result left her too vulnerable and that she's a dead woman walking. And the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn says he's ready any time to fight another election. Here's our political correspondent, Vicky Young.
She's putting on a brave face, but Theresa May knows she's thrown her party into turmoil. The shock of election night is still sinking in. After church this morning, the Prime Minister rang round colleagues who'd been defeated on Thursday. She's in office for now, but how much longer?
I said during the election campaign that if re-elected I would intend to serve a full term. But what I'm doing now is actually getting on with the immediate job. And I think that's what's important. I think that's what the public would expect. They want to see government providing that certainty and stability.
But senior Conservatives have demanded changes.
It's going to require a different approach. We're going to see, I hope, more collective decision-making in the Cabinet. I and other senior colleagues have made that clear to her. And I think you will also see that she will want to work much more closely with the parliamentary party.
And this was the first sign that Mrs May has been forced to reach out. Her old enemy Michael Gove, who she sacked, returns to the Cabinet as Environment Secretary. And he'll be sitting alongside Boris Johnson. The two men spectacularly fell out over the Tory leadership contest last year. Today, the Foreign Secretary denied he was plotting another challenge for the top job.
Just a little wave for Michael Gove, best of friends.
Jeremy Corbyn did not win this election. It's absolutely right that she should go ahead, form a government and deliver on the priorities of the people. And I'm going to be backing her, and absolutely everybody I'm talking to is going to be backing her as well.
He's obviously not spoken to this former colleague.
Oh, yeah, I mean, Theresa May is a dead woman walking. It's just how long she's going to remain on death row. And I think we will know I think we will know very shortly. In other words, we could easily get to the middle of next week and it all collapses for her.
The Labour leader says Theresa May's position is vulnerable and he's ready for another general election.
We cannot go on with a period of great instability. We have a programme, we have the support, and we are ready to fight another election campaign as soon as may be, because we want to be able to serve the people of this country.
Life without a majority in the House of Commons will be very different. Controversial policies like grammar schools, social care and pension changes may bite the dust. Senior Tory backbenchers say compromises will be needed.
There's no point in sailing ahead with items that were in the manifesto, which we won't get through Parliament.
To get anything done, the Conservatives need votes from another party. They're trying to do a deal with Northern Ireland's 10 Democratic Unionists. Today, both sides suggested that the principles of an agreement were in place.
Well, we had very good discussions yesterday with the Conservative Party in relation to how we could support them in forming a national government, one that would bring stability to the nation. And those discussions continue. We have made good progress, but the discussions continue.
After such a bad political miscalculation, most leaders would be forced out. But many Conservative MPs don't have the appetite for a distracting leadership contest, just as Brexit talks are about to start. And they certainly don't want to risk a second general election. For now, Theresa May's colleagues are rallying behind her, but she's certainly not in charge of her own political destiny. Vicky Young, BBC News, Downing Street.
Well, with negotiations on Brexit due to begin in days, where does all the current turmoil leave the government strategy? Our political correspondent Ben Wright has been looking at the options. There's some flash photography in his report.
Almost a year ago, Britain voted to leave the EU, but last week's chaotic election result has reopened the arguments over how, on what terms, on the priorities, on the tactics, just days before divorce talks with the EU are due to start. Some Tory MPs are demanding Theresa May has a rethink.
She's now got to make sure that she understands that the British people have rejected a hard Brexit. We're leaving the EU. I don't think there's any change there. But we're not going to be leaving the EU in some irresponsible way that will damage our country and, of course, the future generations.
A manifesto to see us through Brexit and beyond.
Theresa May had wanted a thumping mandate from voters for this, the Tories' manifesto, which set out their aims for Brexit. It promised to take Britain out of the single market and have control over EU migration to Britain, to strike new free trade deals with the EU and other countries. Theresa May also said no Brexit deal was better than a bad one, a threat to walk away from talks.
Every Conservative Scottish, English and Welsh MP was elected on our manifesto, so obviously we deliver the plans in that manifesto as best we can, including and especially on Brexit.
Even though Theresa May didn't win the election outright, today ministers insisted the government's Brexit strategy had not changed. But the political reality has. Roughly half of Tory MPs in the House of Commons backed Remain in last year's referendum. And now, after this electoral humiliation, they may feel emboldened to try and water down Theresa May's Brexit plan. But the Prime Minister is trapped because the other half of her parliamentary party, also livid about this election result, will be furious if there is any compromise. One pro-EU Tory grandee was scathing.
Brexit is the cancer gnawing at the heart of the Conservative Party. And there's a lot of talk of changing leader, may well come to that, but it's not about changing just the leader, it's changing the policy.
There is no appetite or mandate in Parliament for trying to stop Brexit. Like the Tories, Labour has committed to leaving the EU. But how is the question?
Let's be clear, we're respecting the decision of the referendum. We are Democrats. We're respecting the decision. Yes, but I think people will interpret membership of the single market as not respecting that referendum.
Others in Labour say it's time to get the whole of Parliament behind a Brexit strategy.
Now there should be a sort of cross-party commission or group set up to try and take forward those negotiations in a way that is open, that is thoughtful, that is consensual, that accepts that not everybody is going to get the deal they want.
All this confusion comes 2 months after Britain formally handed in its notice to leave the EU. Brussels is waiting to negotiate. The 2-year clock is ticking. Ben Wright, BBC News, Westminster.
As talks with the Democratic Unionists continue, what are voters making of all the uncertainty when it comes to Brexit? Elaine Dunkley has been to Birmingham to find out, a city evenly split between Remain and Leave in last year's EU referendum.
Birmingham, one of the most divided cities in the UK when it comes to Brexit. But can people here agree on the best course of action for Britain?
I want to know what's happening with jobs.
How much is it going to cost?
I want to know what's going to happen with immigration and migration.
First stop, Shard End. This area had the highest number of Leave voters in last year's EU referendum. What are the big issues for you?
Well, to be honest, since Brexit was introduced sort of thing, our business has declined. And since all the confusion, people are holding back the money. Our main clients are not spending the money like they did.
Imports and exports will be harder unless we get the right deals, and I think that's what May's got to fight for.
To be honest, I don't really understand the
what Brexit actually entails. I don't think many people really understand what happens.
Next stop Moseley, where people overwhelmingly voted to remain in the European Union.
With regards to the DUP, they are quite sensible in the sense that they will want hospitals and schools and roads in Northern Ireland, which they can get as a result of the sort of arrangement with the Conservatives, and they do want a soft Brexit. So on balance, it's actually a good result.
Is Theresa May the right person to do the negotiation?
I think she's weak. I think that the fiasco pretty much since last June in terms of how she's run the party hasn't helped her. I think it makes her look small in front of the Europeans, and I think that might have an issue.
In Brussels, the EU has its negotiating position ready and is waiting. Meanwhile here, the debate about how best to keep Europe as a friend with benefits continues. Elaine Dunkley, BBC News.
Royal Ireland correspondent Chris Buckler is in Belfast and our deputy political editor John Pienaar is in Downing Street. Chris, the leader of the Democratic Unionists, Arlene Foster, she's in London to meet the Prime Minister on Tuesday. What does she want in return for her support?
Well, Clive, there's been a lot of talk about the DUP's stance on social issues like gay marriage and also abortion, and the concerns that some Tory MPs may have about those. But I've no doubt that the DUP's priority in these negotiations is going to be money, not morality. Northern Ireland already gets more per head in terms of public funding than any other part of the UK, but this economy and public services here, they need investment, so expect the DUP to ask for cash. They will also want to say on Brexit negotiations and assurances about the strengthening of the different parts of the UK to bring that union together. However, what is happening in Westminster will undoubtedly have an impact at Stormont too, where negotiations to try to get power sharing back up and running are due to begin tomorrow. It's going to be difficult if the DUP are propping up the Conservatives in Parliament to see them as honest brokers, for Theresa May's government to be seen as just facilitators in those talks. And that's why we've had a statement from the Irish Prime Minister Enda Kenny today, warning that nothing should be done to jeopardise the Good Friday Agreement. And in his words, you can see some concerns about this potential deal between the Tories and the DUP.
And John, at Downing Street, Theresa May has made it clear tonight, John, that she'll serve a full term as Prime Minister. Just how safe is she?
Well, Clive, the timidity of today's reshuffle was evidence of the Prime Minister's vulnerability. No significant movement and the promotion of a pro-European had to be balanced by bringing a Brexiteer, Michael Gove, in from the cold. Today, for the first time that I think I can ever remember, the Tory MP's chairman, Graham Brady, the sort of posh shop steward to Tory backbenchers and maybe the most discreetly powerful figure at Westminster on the backbenches, warned her publicly that anything that upsets those MPs in the coming parliamentary year risks defeat. And the most reliably on-message minister in the cabinet, Michael Fallon, warned her she'd better listen to her ministers in future or presumably risk a mutiny. She looks like a prime minister strapped into an ejector seat with upwards of 100 fingers hovering over the ejector button. You saw Boris Johnson there, so I don't think we should expect a challenge to Theresa May, at least not yet. But that owes little or nothing to loyalty and respect and everything to the party's deepest instincts of self-preservation. Tories don't think they could handle a challenge this close to the start of Brexit talks, and senior Tories I've been speaking to positively fear the possibility of a second election. Her position, Theresa May's position, looks painful. Her party's looks deeply uncomfortable, and it can't be ideal for the country which might have expected something more stable, something stronger, so close to the brink of Brexit.
OK, John, many thanks for that. John Pienaar there at Downing Street and Chris Buckler in Belfast. Thank you. Now, police have released new images of the Manchester Arena bomber, saying they now fully understand the movements of Salman Abedi, almost hour by hour in the weeks leading up to the attack. They believe he constructed the bomb alone and stored the components in a car. Today, detectives released the last people they were holding for questioning about the attack, as our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford explains.
It was in this white Nissan Micra, bought just 2 days before he left for Libya, that police believe the Manchester bomber stored the parts to make his device, in plastic barrels police found later in the car. Salman Abedi flew out of the country on the 15th of April and arrived back in Manchester on the 18th of May. He was then caught on CCTV cameras with a blue suitcase going backwards and forwards to the flats in Rusholme where the white car was parked. Detectives believe he was collecting pre-prepared bomb parts from the car for him to assemble alone at this flat in central Manchester. In a statement, police investigating the bomber said, "We understand how the chemicals and equipment were obtained and where the bomb was assembled. We have an understanding of where he's been in the days before the explosion, almost hour by hour." Detectives are still searching a landfill site in the hopes of finding the blue suitcase, which could contain crucial evidence. Police investigating the Manchester attack originally talked of a network. 20 people were detained in the UK, and a senior officer said some of the arrests were very significant. But today, the last of those arrested was released, leaving just Salman Abedi, who is dead, and his brother Hashim Abedi, who's being held in Libya. Detectives say they want to talk to Hashim Abedi, who left the country with his older brother on the 15th of April. He's being detained by the Libyan Ministry of Interior's Special Deterrence Force.
All roads in this investigation point towards Libya. Libya is not a country that really we can operate with any due certainty. Investigations will be difficult for British police within Libya.
Police say some of the men they arrested and released appeared to have bought materials that can be used to make explosives, and some were in contact with Abedi in the last few days. But detectives say at this time they are satisfied with their explanations. Daniel Sandford, BBC News.
In Libya, the notorious son of the country's former leader, Colonel Gaddafi, is reported to have been released from prison. A militia group controlling the town of Zintan in the west of the country says it's freed Saif al-Islam after 6 years in jail. He's still wanted for war crimes by the International Criminal Court. From Libya, our Middle East correspondent Ola Gerin has this report.
Saif al-Islam, for years the pampered public face of a brutal regime, now once again a free man. He was Colonel Gaddafi's chosen heir, due to inherit the family dictatorship. That was before he fell into rebel hands during the revolution of 2011. He was captured trying to flee, and later appeared minus a few fingers, the result of an airstrike, he said. He was sentenced to death by a court in Tripoli for war crimes during the uprising, and he's still wanted by the International Criminal Court in The Hague, accused of crimes against humanity. Tripoli's Martyrs Square, cradle of the revolution, was the picture of calm today. But in this fractured country, the release of Saif al-Islam could deepen old wounds and new divisions. Those who gathered here in the square 6 years ago, celebrating freedom, hoped they'd seen the last of the Gaddafis. Now they have to adjust to the fact that the dictator's son has been freed. Many will see this as a betrayal of the revolution, of those who fought and died. But the Gaddafi name still carries power here. So much so that no one we spoke to around the square would show their face on camera. But most accepted that Saif had been freed. Not so surprising, perhaps, when you consider Libya's descent into chaos since Colonel Gaddafi was toppled. This man told us, better the devil you know. He's not like his father, he said. He's still young. He can give a lot to the country and push for progress. In the past, Saif al-Islam commanded considerable support, and in places still does. But his return could spark fresh instability in this battle-scarred nation. Orla Gerin, BBC News, Tripoli.
In France, President Macron is hoping to tighten his grip on power in the country's parliamentary elections. Early indications after the first round of voting suggest he's on course to secure a big majority for the party he formed just a year ago. Our Paris correspondent Lucy Williamson has the latest.
5 weeks after snatching the presidency from more experienced hands, Emmanuel Macron is doing the same with the parliament. His party, La République En Marche, is on track for a landslide, little more than a year after it was formed. The runoff vote next Sunday will decide the exact number of seats, but at party HQ, they're already looking ahead to government.
The significance of this result is clear.
But we must show humility and determination to meet the big challenges of the next 5 years.
President Macron voted at his home in Le Touquet today, not as a candidate this time, but as the man elected to change France. While the polling station of far-right leader Marine Le Pen, fighting for a seat in the country's northeast, was marked by a solitary fan and a selfie. Her party, once predicted to win up to 80 seats, is now expected to get no more than a handful.
Front National supporters must turn out en masse next Sunday. It's essential that we win seats so we can oppose the catastrophic politics of Mr Macron, which include destroying worker rights.
70%. Mr Macron's party could end up controlling around 3/4 of the French parliament, with the centre-right Republicans forming the backbone of a shrunken opposition.
Emmanuel Macron is a man on a hurry. He wants to push his reforms as quickly as possible. The problem is that the lack of opposition in the next parliament will bring opposition elsewhere, and that opposition might be in the streets, and the French are very good at bringing opposition in the streets.
A clear majority would be a big help to the new president in tackling France's intractable labour laws. But any majority he does get is likely to need sensitive political handling. The party draws its candidates from the old centre-left and centre-right, with half of them new to politics entirely. Next Sunday's vote will begin a new political era, new to voters, president and parliamentarians alike. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Paris.
Wales have drawn their latest Football World Cup qualifier against Serbia. It was Aaron Ramsey who opened the scoring from the penalty spot, but Serbia drew level in the second half, with Newcastle's Alexander Mitrovic getting the equaliser. Wales have now drawn 5 of their 6 matches as they try to make it through to next summer's finals in Russia. And it's been a long time coming, but England have won their first Football World Cup at any age group since 1966. The Young Lions of the under-20s team lifted the trophy with a 1-0 victory over Venezuela. Our sports correspondent Andy Swiss was watching.
England, World Cup winners.
Yes, you heard him right. It's taken a mere 51 years, but once again English football is basking in global glory. The so-called Young Lions turning their promise into the ultimate prize. Not that it was easy though. Paul Simpson's side began as favourites against Venezuela, and when Dominic Calvert-Lewin slotted them ahead, the trophy seemed theirs for the taking. But after the break, Venezuela were handed a lifeline, penalty, that age-old scourge of English football. But not this time.
And it's kept out by Woodman. Freddie Woodman is England's hero.
And if Venezuela thought it was all over, well, it was now.
And England have won the Under-20 World Cup.
Most of these players have little Premier League experience, and as their triumph was shared by England's senior team at their training camp, that is now their challenge.
Fantastic achievement for them. The aim is that those players come through to the seniors, and a big part of that now is for them to get opportunities with their clubs, because I think they've shown if at under-20s we're world champions, then there's enough players there to fulfil careers in the game without the clubs looking elsewhere.
But at last, those indelible images of England's only other World Cup win have some company. Yes, success at senior level is still some leap, but after years of looking to the past, a day to celebrate the future. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
That's it. You can see more on all of today's stories on the BBC News channel, but do stay with us on BBC One. It's now time for all the news where you are. Have a very good night.